Thank you for joining us. The need to promote Jewish life and keep the flame of heritage burning is greater today than ever. One of the best to speak about this is the spiritual leader of Temple Kol Tikvah in Parkland, Florida. Rabbi Bradd Boxman is committed to a number of specific areas, including his being a teacher of Torah, being in touch with the needs of his congregation, focusing upon issues of social justice, communicating effectively with his congregation by speaking honestly and passionately about issues of Jewish and social concern from his standpoint of moral integrity, compassion, and kindness. We will meet Rabbi Boxman following these messages.
You know you need CoQ10 and fish oil for your heart. You also know you need a multivitamin to maintain your health. But what you don't know is that an award-winning CoQ10, fish oil, and multivitamin are all made by Life Extension. Why settle for less than the power of science, the power of life, the power of Life Extension?
With us now is Rabbi Bradd Boxman. It's a real pleasure and privilege to have you on the show, sir.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me.
We live in a changing world, a society of so much progress with technology, yet we need to keep the flame of heritage burning. Tell us a little of your thoughts with that regard.
Well, I think that any good religion is there to be able to remind people what really matters in life. And it's so easy to get caught up in the technological world that we live in. To be able to put down the cell phone, to be able to connect to people rather than to mechanical devices. So I think that Judaism with Shabbat demands of us that we give ourselves an opportunity to reconnect with the spirit and with the things in the world that can truly give us real meaning to our lives.
Interesting thoughts. Do you believe that the so-called idiot box has actually eroded and damaged into action? I say this because I remember that in Israel, after I emigrated from England, when Televizia Klalit, General TV, came to be, people would say, when you'd visit them, quiet, we're watching a TV show right now, sit down, have some coffee. But prior to that, people would actually interact more. So in Israel at that time, it was interesting how suddenly it had an effect on social activity.
Look, I think all technology is a two-edged sword. It depends how you use it. A lot of people love to put certain things as, they're evil. They're not evil, they're creation of humankind. So if you use it for proper purposes, it's the most amazing thing in the world. When I lived in the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas, and a hurricane was coming, and I could turn on the Weather Channel and see what I needed to know to save my life, that's a positive and wonderful use of technology, as well as many other good things that television provides in terms of news and entertainment and things of that nature. But like anything else, if you abuse it, if you let it control your life rather than letting it enhance your life, then technology becomes an evil rather than a good.
All tools can be used in a positive way or not so positive.
Correct.
Rabbi, you are the leader of a magnificent synagogue in Parkland. Tell us about Kol Tikvah and what's unique about it.
Thank you. Congregation Kol Tikvah is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. I've been the rabbi there for 6 of those 25 years now, starting my 7th year in July. The congregation numbers about 400 families, but what makes us unique is that we're extremely young, dynamic congregation. What I mean by that is that we have 160 children every day in our preschool. We have close to 400 children in our religious school and youth groups. The synagogue, I call it a synagogue on steroids, or a synagogue that never sleeps. There's tremendous activity there every single day. Even in the summer, we have camps that we produce and put on for the children. So there is a thirst for knowledge and learning. We have a lot of adult education programs, and we are also connected to Israel in a very serious way. Our mission statement of our congregation, which is what attracted me to Kol Tikvah, actually has a line in it that says we we maintain a relationship with the state of Israel. It's actually in the mission statement of the congregation. And so we have a very active Zionist and Israel-oriented programming at our congregation.
Rabbi, a question I must ask you is the United States regarding Israel as important an ally as ever, in your opinion?
I think there's no ally that's more important than Israel, than the United States, on so many levels, politically, economically, in terms of the cultural respect that Americans have for Israel. I sometimes think Israel doesn't realize how important the United States is to its well-being. But I think that Americans in general have a love affair with Israel, and will always, as long as we share the same democratic values that are important to us, and that Israel plays a strategic position that it plays in the region. So I believe that there are vital interests on both sides.
How interesting it is that Israel, such a tiny country in this troubled part of the world, newly resurrected from thousands of years, and since the beginning, middle of last century, they've made the desert bloom and done so much to change the environment there. Even the weather changed because of all of the trees that Jewish hands have planted. What are your thoughts with regard to the achievements of the State of Israel?
There's barely words that can speak to the achievements and accomplishments of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael. They're almost too numerous to mention in almost every field of endeavor. It's one of the things that gives me, as my congregants, as we travel to Israel, a chance to revel in the renewed creativity and imagination of the Jewish people, free in our own country to do all that we've done. Like any other democracy and pluralistic society, there's its challenges as well. And I believe the Jewish people have risen to many challenges, and there are challenges yet to be met. That's why I see an active Zionism is about reaching across the sea to our friends and sharing with them the best of the values that we hold dear, and merging them with Jewish values to create the kind of Jewish society that we can all be proud of and continue to be proud of.
How fascinating it is that our people have done so much throughout these thousands of years, actually, to be, as some regard Jewish people as being a light unto the Gentiles and so forth, such an inspiring bunch, yet they argue among themselves so much in Israel, in the Knesset. You see, you put 10 Jews together and you have 20 arguments.
Yes, but you see, Richard, I think that's the key to our survival. The key to our survival is that there's never been a monolithic view within Judaism. We've never had a papacy. We've never had a Vatican. We have a people that values the diversity of opinion. It says that the Torah has 70 faces of Torah, that you can look at it every which way and find a different meaning. And each one has a divine origin. And so when we are given the opportunity to debate, to discuss, hopefully respectfully, and try to find the best answer for the day, for our time, then that's the most we can ever hope for. And I truly believe that's the secret to our survival, is that we've had many different competing views of what is best in terms of Zionism, in terms of Judaism, in terms of our survival as a people. And history will judge which is the stream or the way that will carry us successfully into the future. We've survived for 4,000 years. We've had a lot of views. I believe that there's a unique creativity in the Jewish soul that will allow us to continue to survive, please God, for another 4,000 years.
Bezrat Hashem. Congregation Kol Tikvah is known to be a very dynamic institution, so much inclusive, interactive, creative activity, Tell us more about what is unique about Kol Tikvah.
Well, we have 6 youth groups with almost 400 children. I think we start there. We have our children, our teenagers, finish school and come to the synagogue. We just graduated our largest class of 26 in our confirmation class. If you could read some of the things that they wrote about what it means to be Jewish in their own words, you would feel so proud of the future for the Jewish people. We have, as I mentioned, a very active adult education committee. I just gave a talk the other day on my time as a spy in the Soviet Union, and that might be a talk for another time for you. But when I went to visit refuseniks in 1980, and there were 50 people that came to learn about that experience that I had. We have a Jewish history class that meets every Thursday from 12 to 1. We have Bagels and Bible every Saturday morning. We have all kinds of services. I recognize that there are different demographics in the congregation. Some want a more traditional style service, and some want something more avant-garde. And so we offer a rock Shabbat once a month with our own in-house rock band, and it's a complete service, but in a way you've never seen it before. And the house is packed with hundreds of people who are dancing and singing and enjoying Shabbat in a way that they might not otherwise in a different kind of setting.
We have to cover that at some point.
I would love to invite you.
Rabbi, this is most interesting, but I'm afraid we must pause for these commercial messages. We'll be right back. We're back with Rabbi Bradd Boxman. Rabbi, a question I'd like to pick up on is the Jewish community seems to be so disturbingly fragmented always, in Israel and here. We touched upon that earlier. Share this with our audience as to why you believe this is so.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I think one of the strengths we have is the diversity of opinion and the ways that we have. Look, when Zionism was formed, it wasn't monolithic. There were many different ideas about what that Zionism should look like: labor Zionism, political Zionism, socialist Zionism. There were so many different viewpoints about what the state should look like. And now that we have a state, we need to have the multiplicity of ideas that will help shape the best future for the Jewish people. And I believe in Israel there's a vibrancy, there is a democracy. May not, depending upon what side you're on, you may not like the results, but at the end of the day, it is a democracy. People go to the polls, they argue, they debate. And if you read the newspapers, there's still great diversity of opinion. I think outside of Israel, especially in America, and I think especially in South Florida, there seems to be this kind of idea that, you know, there's one message, we all have to hone to the same message, and it has to be unequivocal support of Israel no matter what Israel does. And I think part of it is a mindset that says that Israel's embattled and Israel's in danger, the whole world's against us. Well, Israel's changed, the world has changed, and Israel is still very much in the middle of a very bad neighborhood. And Israel does need to have the strongest defense ever that we can possibly muster. But it is not the fragile Israel of 30, 40 years ago. And Israel, I believe, personally now I'm speaking, needs to take risks for the greater good and look beyond the horizon. But that's my view. My point in saying this, though, is that I see in American discourse on Israel amongst Jews that if you don't hone to the party line, which may be the line that's currently in government right now, then somehow you're a traitor. Somehow you are betraying Israel. And I think that's dangerous. I think there has to be room at the table for any Jewish organization that says they support a free, democratic, pluralistic Jewish state with safe and secure borders. Once we say that, then all cards should be on the table about what that should look like. And there needs to be a civilized debate and discussion. At Kol Tikvah, I am proud that we've carved out a space where we've had many different views presented, from J Street on the left to ZOA on the right, and everything in between. And we've gotten into some vociferous debates and discussions. But Kol Tikvah, as long as I'm there, will always be a place where all voices, if they hone to that definition I said, will be welcomed. And I fear that in many places in the United States, and especially in South Florida, I know, in fact, some of my colleagues can't speak freely from the pulpit about their views about Israel. That is a shame, and that is dangerous for the Jewish people when we shut down conversation because people are afraid to speak against whatever they think is the right thing to have to say.
I absolutely respect and agree with your view on that. Interestingly, I had the privilege of interviewing Abba Evan and Yitzhak Rabin and they expressed the same views on my show with regard to taking risks for peace. Back to the big picture again. It seems that despite history and all that we've experienced in the last century, that the rise in anti-Semitism is a fact that is a greater threat than ever. What are your thoughts with regard to anti-Semitism?
Anti-Semitism is a disease. It's a disease that people have when they look for either the lack of knowledge, or they look to place blame on a group that is unable to defend itself. Look, there was anti-Semitism in Japan, and there were hardly any Jews in Japan. So it's a terrible malady that has been with us since there have been Jews. I believe that there is an uptick in anti-Semitism. We see it. We see it in Europe for sure. We have to ask ourselves how much of it is truly anti-Jewish and how much is connected to the conflict in the Middle East, and where do they overlap, and where can they not be separated? When does anti-Zionism become anti-Semitism? When does anti-Semitism become anti-Zionism? And I think there has to be a distinction and discussion regarding that. Neither are correct, both are wrong, but I think they're different animals that have to be looked at differently. Look, we have our people that have suffered more than any other people in the world. We know what it means. But God help us if we hide behind a victim complex, that somehow that the world is against us, the world is out there, nobody loves us, and we circle the wagons, and the doomsday is around the corner. I can't live that way. I don't believe we should live that way. I believe as an American Jew, we live in one of the most amazing places Jews have ever lived, ever, with more freedoms, rights that we hold as Americans and as Jews. Just the other day, Yale University at their graduation, the president, who happens to be Jewish, in his graduation speech, noted 5 or 6 different texts from Jewish tradition, from the rabbinic text to his graduating class, freely speaking in Jewish speak from Yale University. I think that is a credit to the country that we live in. So I temper the wariness that we have to have about the rise of anti-Semitism by not overreacting and becoming, scared that the next, God forbid, Hitler is around the corner.
Well, speaking of Hitler and genocide, it wasn't only Jews who were persecuted and singled out for extermination. How atrocious. There were many other people who suffered, and we mustn't forget that, and the lessons that we must all learn from the Holocaust. Well, I should have you answer that.
I'm interested in your views too. Look, there's only one people that was singled out for total extinction, and there have been a few books that have recently come out that have actually proven about Hitler's and the Nazi regime's efforts to make a world Judenrein. It wasn't an idea to make the world free of all gays, to make the world free of all communists. There was one mindset: no more Jews, no more connection to the Old Testament, and that was part of it. So I think there was something unique about his mania, his diabolic tendencies. However, you are 1,000% right. God forbid we ever forget the fact that it was not just Jews, and that there are still people today that are under the threat of genocide. And if we as a people don't stand up for the rights of others when they stand in the way of danger, then we haven't learned anything from the Holocaust.
Rabbi, how do you explain the fact that Germany, a land of great culture and literature, famed science, poetry, how could such a country be so developed in some areas yet be free of moral responsibility? So what really is the value of famed literature, classical music, and all of these things if it's not accompanied by social responsibility?
Again, it goes back to our previous conversation. I think those are all tools, and it's how you use them. Culture, Germans had their culture. They got rid of the culture that we would hold as culture, but they would call Nazi culture their culture. They turned right into wrong or wrong into right, and their world was right. So I think, again, you have to be very careful that you don't blame the culture. I think that we have to ask ourselves, like historians, what were the factors that led to the Nazi Holocaust? And part of it is economic collapse. Part of it is political machinations of the West that put Germany in such a bad place. Part of it is the way that a small group could gain power so quickly and wield that power over others. I mean, we know as social scientists and historians that we can dissect how and why such terrible things happen. The more interesting question to me is how the fact that it wasn't just the Nazi intelligentsia that brought about the Holocaust, it was average people who went out and their job was to shoot 100 Jews today and go home and have dinner and play with their kids and go out tomorrow morning and shoot another 100 Jews. Where's the human conscience? What is it that made those people who were the average people who did the killing every single day? That to me is a fascinating question, and it's been looked at before, what makes a person be able to turn others into objects. And that's what it does come down to. You couldn't, as a human being, most people have some bit of a conscience, unless you're a total psychopath. And you then turn the Jews or anybody that's unworthy into an object that you can't say is a human being anymore. I'm getting rid of mice. Mice aren't good. They'll carry disease. They'll carry vermin. So we need to get rid of them. So if you convince yourself of that, then you can carry out most terrible deeds.
Unspeakable. On a more positive note, Rabbi.
Good. I need something more positive.
Certainly, yes, I have this for you, right, coming up. So, education, experiencing Israel for oneself, visiting. Kol Tikvah takes people to Israel regularly, and for people to actually visit Israel, see for themselves all the holy places, the technology, the agriculture, the achievements, the museums. Share with our audience some of the programs that you have already led and what's planned for the future.
Thank you. I'm planning now my 6th trip in 7 years from Kol Tikvah. I think I've taken well over 100 of my congregants in that period of time, and God willing, a lot more to come. I believe there's few experiences that will affirm your Jewish identity, confirm your Jewish identity more than a trip to Israel. Youth group, going to day school, those are important things. But a trip to Jewish camping has been proven. But one of the things, if you want to make sure that your kids come back and feel Jewish, if you want to reaffirm your Jewish identity, that's why birthright is so important. Get them to Israel, because there's nothing like it. And to understand the story of the Jewish people, understand why we exist, what purpose we exist for, to have an understanding of what Israel means in its great complexity. So when people talk to you about it and the conflict and so forth, you have a handle on it. You can say you saw it, you felt it, you understand it at least a little better than being 7,000 miles away. When I do a trip, I make sure that it's fun. I don't expect anybody to go to Israel and say, oh, cross it off the bucket list, I've been there. You might do that for a safari. You might do that for going to Paris. I believe Israel is a pilgrimage, and you make many pilgrimages in your life. So when I took my kids when they were young, I wanted them to have the best time in their life. So they associated Israel with Disneyland, that it was the place where they felt so happy. And that's what I want my congregants to feel. So the trip is very interactive. It's very active. We'll go kayaking down the Jordan River. We'll have an archaeological dig. They're digging in the earth with their hands. We'll plant trees in Israel. We'll go into the fields and pick corn to be given to the needy. We'll meet with Israeli soldiers. We'll go to Israeli homes and have dinner and Shabbat with them so that we can understand what it's like to live in Israel from someone who's living there. We begin at Yad Vashem, but we end at Independence Hall, so they get the broad sweep of understanding Jewish history and why Israel needs to exist and does exist. And we have many speakers that speak to us about all different kinds of from all different kinds of perspectives. Again, I try to present the complexity of Israel in all its diversity and let people draw their own conclusions. But I'm sure, convinced, that everyone that comes back is touched in a deep way. And in fact, in many of my trips, I have people going again a second and a third time because they have had such an amazing experience. My next trip is planned, and it is open to members who are not necessarily members of the congregation. It is June 14th to 26th of next summer.
Sounds phenomenal. I'd love to join you. Before we conclude, share a final message for our audience, please.
Thank you. I just want to thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show. I think that the more we can raise awareness of our Jewish heritage and issues that are confronting the Jewish people and putting it out there, I congratulate you for your show. I think that most importantly, I would like to say that we have to have a place where respectful conversation and dialogue takes place. And I know you've had a diversity of people on your show, and I hope you'll continue to do so. to enrich the Jewish people through open and honest dialogue for the good of the Jewish people. And so look forward to maybe having another conversation with you in the future.
I like the idea of bringing this diverse group of guests on the show from one extreme to the, well, should I say extreme, from one side to the other, to Kol Tikvah, as we discussed. And it's really a pleasure and privilege to have you with us here today. And we will do some more of this.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'll be right back. This concludes our program for today. I'm Richard Peritz. Thank you for being with us.